Dear subscribers, students, and the viewers, welcome to the IAS Mentor. This would be our lecture number 12 in the series Indian Polity. The objective of this particular series is to provide a broader idea on the subject Indian polity, and in the process, we'll also cover some of the relevant books like LAXMIKANTH, D.D BASU, which are all considered to be very important for the students preparing for the UPSC examination. This series will not only cater to the requirements of students preparing for UPSC IAS examination, but also for the students preparing for the various state public service commission and other competitive examination as well. So with that, we'll enter into today's lecture, where we are basically going to understand the topic Preamble to the Constitution of India. This is where we are actually beginning the subject Indian Constitution or the Indian polity. But till this point of time, we are trying to understand or we are trying to build our foundational knowledge, the basic knowledge, as we can move forward and we can understand the complex things as we'll proceed further. So we started with the understanding as to what is a constitution. We studied about the Constituent Assembly. We studied about the historical background, which gradually led to various constitutional development during the British rule. And then we also understood some of the key terms that are very relevant to the subject, and we also understand some of the basic features of the Indian Constitution. So now we are getting into the preamble. So we'll try to understand the preamble, and especially when we discuss about the preamble, what is very important is that we'll have to understand some of the key words that is mentioned in the preamble. Because as it is said that the preamble is nothing but the summary of the entire constitution. The preamble is nothing but the philosophy of the entire constitution. The preamble is nothing but the jewel set of the constitution. In the opinion of the Supreme Court of India, the preamble is nothing but it is a key to unravel the minds of the makers of the constitution. Or in other words, if there's any ambiguity with some of the provisions inside the constitution, how do we get to understand all those things is by interpreting those provisions in line with what is said in the preamble, or what is the philosophy that is summarized in the preamble, based on which all these things has to be interpreted. So this is basically what is the way by which preamble has been described. So now we'll try to understand each and every single keyword that is given in the preamble. That is very, very important for us to proceed further. So if you look into the preamble, which is behind me, you can just read it. So what is this preamble? Okay, before I read this particular preamble, in fact, this preamble is nothing but today it is a modified version of the objectives resolution which was introduced by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in the Constituent Assembly. So there are also questions that is asked in this particular regard. What is objectives resolution? So in the Constituent Assembly, objectives resolution was introduced as a guiding document based on which the Constituent Assembly would prepare the Constitution of India. And preamble is nothing but the modified version of that. So where did we take the idea of this preamble? It is said that the idea has been taken from the Constitution of United States of America, which had the first written constitution in the world. And thereby they also had a preamble. So when we were drafting our constitution, which is basically going to be a written constitution, we also had our own preamble. So this is some basic information that you may keep in your mind. And now let us get into the preamble. See, it is saying that the preamble reads, "We the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure all its citizens justice, social, economic and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individuals and the unity and integrity of the nation in our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact and to give to ourselves this constitution." So if you look into the preamble is nothing but the philosophy of the entire constitution. That means we need to understand certain basic keywords to decode as to what the constitution says. We'll have to understand the keywords like what is sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. Now, basically, these words, the sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, which is mentioned in the preamble, describes the nature of Indian state. India as a state, what type of state is India? And then if you look into the remaining lines after that, which talks about which talks about justice, social, economic and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, worship, and then equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them fraternity. So all these things reflects what is called as the objectives of this particular constitution. And the objective of the constitution also includes to promote or to safeguard dignity of each and every individual, and also to preserve the unity and territorial integrity of India. So basically all these things reflects as to, as a constitution, what does it want to serve to the people of our country. So this is objectives, this is the nature of the Indian state. And apart from that, the preamble also gives us the information as to who is the source of authority behind the Constitution of India. It is the people who has given this power or delegated this power to the Constituent Assembly, and on behalf of the people, the Constituent Assembly has drafted the Indian Constitution. And it also gives us an idea as to when the Constitution was adopted. It was adopted on 26 November 1949. That means that is on that particular day the Constituent Assembly has drafted and adopted the Constitution officially. But however, it took some time before the Constituent Assembly, or in other words, it took some time before the Constitution came into force, that is on 26 January 1950. And why this date 26 January 1950 is because of the historical reasons. In the Indian history, in the modern history, you will understand during the freedom struggle. So this 26 January was a historical date. And way back in 1931, 26 January 1950 was declared to be what is called as the complete Independence Day or Purna Swaraj Day. And therefore, this date was decided as to give effect to the Constitution of India. Anyways, now let us proceed further. We will try to understand the key words that is given in the Constitution one by one. So first is basically what is the nature of the state. So first thing which talks about the nature of the state is sovereign. Now what do you understand by the word sovereign? Sovereign means supreme authority, or sovereign means it is the highest authority. So it is very well clear from the Constitution or from the preamble that India is a sovereign authority. That means it is neither a dependent of some other country nor a dominion. So basically, if you see, when India became independent in 1947 by the Indian Independence Act, at that point of time, the status that was conferred upon India is what is a dominion status. Basically, it is a self-governing body or a self-governing political entity with lot of internal autonomy. But however, he accepted the British Crown to be the head of the state. Or there are some representatives of the British Crown who would act as a head of the states. That's basically what is a dominion status. But however, when India adopted its own constitution and that constitution was given effect, it declared itself to be what is called as a sovereign state, that it is completely free to decide both its external as well as the internal affairs. That means nobody can dictate India as to what it has to do internally as well as externally. And that's basically what is called as the concept of sovereignty. And further, this also gives a power to India to cede a territory to a foreign country and to acquire a new territory if it wishes. In fact, all these provisions reflect in the various provisions in the Constitution. As we'll proceed, you will understand that under Article 2 of the Constitution, the Parliament has the power to acquire a new territory. And the Parliament under Article 368, they can cede a territory to a foreign country. So all these things are possible. So definitely India is what is a sovereign authority. So that's the basic understanding you should have. As a sovereign authority, India is free to make any type of policy within its country internally. India is a sovereign country to decide as to what kind of relationship they wanted to have with the respective countries in the world, whom it wanted to have a friendly relation, whom it doesn't want to have a friendly relation, whom it wanted to have a trade ties, whom it doesn't want to be, part of which multilateral agreement it wanted to be, part of which group it want or it doesn't want, whether it has to sign any international conventions or not. India is a sovereign authority to decide all these things, and that's basically what is called as sovereignty. So now the next word, what is called as socialist. So in fact, if you see this particular word socialist is not there in the original constitution. If you read the original constitution, the preamble was reading only as what is called a sovereign democratic republic. These were the only three words which is describing the nature of the state. But however, this word socialist as well as the word secular, and apart from the word socialist and secular, there was also one more word that was inserted into the preamble by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act in 1976. Anyways, we'll discuss all these words. But what do you understand by the word socialist? Socialist means it's a type of an ideology wherein the means of production or the economic activities of a country will be largely controlled by the state. And that's basically what is called as a socialist state. Now, why this particular ideology is famous in some of the countries? It's because of the reason that they thought that if the state is able to control the means of production, if the state is able to control the economic activities, it is better that there will be or it is easier for the state to establish what is called as an egalitarian society, or it is easier for the state to address various issues in the society like poverty, unemployment and all those things, which every state wanted to do so that it benefits the larger sections of the society. So that is the reason as to why the word socialist was inserted by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act in 1976. But then if the idea of socialist or the idea of socialism, probably if it is having a good intention where the state can redistribute the wealth or probably the state can do a lot of welfare to a lot of people, why that was not part of the original constitution? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was someone who was not completely in favor of inserting this word socialist, although nobody denied the fact that there are a number of provisions in the constitution reflect the idea of what is called as socialism or the socialist ideologies. So for example, a part of the provisions in the directive principles of state policy, which we will subsequently discuss, they are all reflecting the socialistic ideologies or the socialistic principles. But despite the fact, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar did not wanted to put this particular idea of socialist in the preamble, so that he wanted that the constitution should not give an impression as to India is a socialist state. Rather, he thought that the kind of principles or the policies that any government or the people wanted to have will be according to the situation and the demands of the time. So what is relevant today may not be relevant tomorrow. So let us not put something fixed in the constitution. So let us not put something fixed in the preamble so that it makes India to be appear like one type of system. But what it should and how it should or what kind of policies it should follow, it depends upon the requirement of that particular time. So he was not against this idea of socialism or socialist, but then he doesn't want to have it in the preamble so that the state should be free to decide whatever they want according to the needs and the circumstances. But anyways, the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act brought in this particular word socialist in the preamble, and it was done during the Prime Ministership of Indira Gandhi, and that was also the emergency time. So Indira Gandhi government had the majority in the parliament, they amended it and they inserted the word socialist into the constitution. But however, you will have to understand the kind of socialist that we follow today in India. It is not, I would say, a very extreme form of socialism. It is more a moderate form of socialistic policies where it would allow both the private means of production as well as the public means of production. So we have private sectors as well, we have public sectors as well. But wherever it is important, those sectors are retained by the government, and wherever the state feels that it is not so important for the welfare of the people, or probably where they don't want to get in, those sectors are opened up for the private sectors. Okay. So socialist here doesn't mean that it is an extreme form of socialism or communism. So it is more basically an idea of what is called as a mixed model of economy that you have got today in India. So this is basically the understanding you should have. So then come to the word what is called as secular. Now what do you understand by the word secular? To put it in a very simple way, secularism means that the state being neutral towards the religion, or in other words, the state does not identify itself with any religion, or the state does not have any official religion. In fact, in India, India does not have any official religion. Neither it identify itself with any religion, nor it discriminates people on the basis of religion. So this is basically what is called as secularism. So basically the state respects all the religion equally. So that is how we identify our secularism. But however, one small difference that I have to put in before I move forward to the next topic. While secularism in general, that the state is neutral towards a religion or the state does not identify itself with any religion, the kind of secularism that we follow in India and the kind of secularism that is followed in the Western countries are quite different. Say the countries like USA or certain other Western countries, the kind of secularism that they follow is little different because of the fact that they follow a concept of what is called as negative secularism, which means there is complete separation between the state and the religion. So whatever is a state, they will not interfere in the matters of religion. They will not intervene in the matters of what is called as the affairs of the religious institutions. The religious institutions, they will do whatever they can do subject to the larger regulations laid down by the law. But normally the state or the institutions of the state, they don't interfere with the religious institutions. But whereas on the contrary, the kind of secularism that we have followed is a tailor-made secularism. We are not following the same approach as it is followed in the Western countries, but what we follow is what is called as a positive secularism. And what do you understand by positive secularism? Here there is no complete separation between the state and the religion. Here it is only the state provides equal respect to all the religion, but the state is not completely separated from the religion in the sense if the state wanted to make interventions in the matters of religion, of course they can make interventions in the matters of religion. Or in other words, they will intervene positively in the matters of religion. Why? Because in case of India, if the state is a mute spectator to what has been done by religious institutions in the name of religion or what people do in the name of religion, it might be possible that some of the practices within the religion can affect the fundamental rights of the people. Say for example, child marriage was very much an accepted practice within Hindu religion and maybe in the other religions also. So probably, and hence the state has to intervene and prevent what is called as child marriage. And there are a lot of other practices, say like dowry, which may be accepted as a part of religion. Say for example, there were practices like instant triple talaq, which is practiced in the name of religion. So the state was not a mute spectator to all these things, but however, the state can intervene in the matters of religion and they can regulate these things, although it is part of the religion. So this is a concept of what is called as positive secularism. So the basic difference between the negative secularism and positive secularism is, well, negative secularism means the state is neutral to the religion and the state is completely separated from the religion. Whereas positive secularism, although the state does not identify itself with any religion, the state is not completely, I would say, separated from the religion, whereas the state can positively intervene in the matters of religion. And in India, we follow what is called as the positive secularism. And if you look into this particular word, secular is also not mentioned in the original constitution in the preamble, and this was also inserted by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976. In fact, the preamble to the Constitution of India was amended only once, and that it was amended by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act in 1976, and it inserted three important words into the preamble, that is socialist, secular, and the word integrity. So you already understood what is socialist, what is secular. We will move forward and we will try to understand the word integrity as well as we will move forward. And then the next keyword which defines the nature of state is what is called as democratic. So democratic means basically the rule by people. So democratic means the legitimacy of any government that will be established in India, it will have that legitimacy only if it have the popular support of the people. And that's basically what is called as democratic. But by making democratic in the preamble, we are not only meaning that the government should be established by people, but apart from that, we also talk of the principle of democracies like what is called as rule of law. That means any democratic government which is established by the people should also function with reasonable restrictions, or it should also ensure what is called as rule of law, or in other words, this government should not function what is called as arbitrarily. And in the process, we'll have to ensure what is called as a democratic society, where people exercise their rights as guaranteed in the constitution. So that's basically what is the idea of democratic. And then the nature of the state also includes the concept of what is called as republic. So what does it mean by republic? So the difference between the concept democratic and the difference between the word republic. So while in democratic it is concerned about how the government is formed or how the government is established, whereas the word republic is dealing with how one becomes the head of the state. And in republic, the head of the state is always through what is called as elections. It can be either direct election or it can be indirect election. That does not matter, but it is only through system of what is called as elections. Now say for example, a country can be democratic but may not be a republic. A country can be democratic as well as republic. Say for example, India is an example of democracy and a republic. The government is elected by the people and then we have a head of the state elected. Although through indirect election, the president is elected indirectly in India. So we are a democratic as well as republic. So republic always means that everybody has an equal opportunity to become the head of the state and there's no discrimination in this regard. So that's basically what is called as republic. But whereas there are certain countries which may be democratic but at the same time not republic. Say for example, Britain today or United Kingdom today is a democracy but not a republic. It's a monarchical democracy. It's a democracy with a monarchical head. And what do you understand by monarchy? Where the head of the state is always, one becomes a head of a state through what is called as a hereditary succession. So from a royal family, somebody becomes king or queen, and when they pass away and then it is succeeds as their highest succeed the throne, and this is basically what is called as monarchy. So try to understand this particular thing. So republic is all about how one becomes the head of the state, whereas democracy is all about how the government is formed. So the nature of the Indian state as envisaged by the Constitution of India is that it should be a sovereign state, it should be a socialist state, it should be a democratic state, it should be a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic as well as a republic state. So these are all the basic understanding that you should have in your mind. So now let us move further and let us also try to understand some of the objectives that they wanted to establish in the constitution. So largely 4 objectives I would say, even beyond that, basically the principle of justice, the principle of liberty, the principle of equality, and also to ensure what is called as fraternity, and thereby ensuring the dignity of each and every individual and preserving the unity and integrity of this particular nation. These are all the broader objectives which is laid down in the preamble, and which is nothing but it is only a summary or the extract of what the Constitution of India says. So let us try to understand these concepts one by one. Justice in terms of social, economic and political. In fact, you will have to remember this particular order. Many times has been asked in UPSC examination, just this order. What is the order of justice? Social, economic and political. In fact, why this particular order? That order of social, economic and political? Because in the words of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in the Constituent Assembly, to him what was very difficult to achieve among the 3 types of justice is the social justice. And the second difficult to achieve is what is called as economic justice, and relatively something which is easier is the economic justice. The political justice. Now why? Because in the words of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, at the commencement of the constitution, everybody will be fairly treated in terms of their political rights, especially the right to vote. So to that extent, political justice is much more easier, but because of the historical exploitation that certain sections of the backward people have been subjected to, and because of this historical exploitation and other reasons, what would be difficult to achieve is what is called as social and economic justice. And hence the state should give priority in the social and economic justice over what is called as political justice. But this doesn't mean that one is more important than the other. Everything has to be achieved. But what is very difficult to achieve is social and economic justice over what is called as political justice. So before we move forward, we'll have to understand as to what does it mean by the concept of justice. Now justice, to put it in a very simple way, it is not talking about the justice which is given in a court of law. It is justice in terms of the policies of the state. It is justice in terms of the various policies and the way those policies treat the people. And that is how we'll have to look into this particular justice. So justice is all about fair and just treatment of the people. So justice is not about equal treatment of the people. So here we are not talking about that the state shall treat everybody equally, but the state should treat everyone in a fair manner. So everybody is given a fair opportunity. Everybody is given an equal opportunity in matters for developing themselves in their life. So that's basically what is called as justice. For example, I'm sure that most of you would have traveled in the public transportation system. Just take a simple example. So if you take that example of traveling in a public transportation system, you might have seen some seats are reserved. Say for example, if you take the metro, today there are certain seats which are reserved for women, certain seats which are reserved for the elderly people or the senior citizens. But there are no seats which is reserved for, say let us assume, for the men. So does it mean it is an equal treatment? Of course it is not an equal treatment. Of course there is a discrimination. But is it bad in the eyes of the constitution? Is it bad in law? It is not bad in law, but this is aimed at providing what is called as a just and a fair treatment. So this is basically what you'll have to understand. So justice is not about equal treatment, but justice is about giving equal opportunities. Justice is about enabling everyone so that they can rise in their life and achieve what they wanted to achieve. So to that extent, the concept of justice can also allow for what is called as the state in its policy to discriminate. But however, that discrimination is not merely called as discrimination. That discrimination is what is called as positive discrimination. Positive discrimination in the policies of the state, which a state does to empower the people who are backward. So these are discrimination, or these are policies which are discriminatory in nature, especially to empower the backward people or the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, so that they also have equal opportunities and fair opportunities to rise in their life and to lead a good life. So this is basically what is called as justice. So some of the examples of social justice measure today in our country, say for example, reservation which is given to the backward classes, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe. These are all examples of what is called as social justice. So similarly, the state can also provide for what is called as economic justice. A fair treatment in terms of access to various resources in the society. Somebody might be rich, so he is having better access to various material resources. Somebody is poor, who may not have access to various material resources. So the state in its policies have to do something to balance this. So for example, the state has a policy of what is called as progressive taxation system. The progressive taxation system is taxing more on the people who are earning more, less on the people who are earning less. So this is an example of what is called as justice. So here there is different classes that is made, and different people are made to pay different taxes. It is not making the people to equally pay the tax, but it is only asking people who are earning more to pay more tax. People are not earning, no tax. People are earning below certain limit, probably no tax. But people are paying more tax, their money is spent to the people who are not even paying the taxes. So these are all examples of what is called as economic justice. Redistribution of material wealth in the society. Land Reforms Act, Zamindari Abolition Act. So some of these legislations which is brought in by the state, they are all aimed at ensuring what is called as economic justice. And then the last thing is basically what is called as political justice. So what is political justice? Again, providing fair opportunities in exercising their political rights. Right to vote in the elections, right to contest in the elections. While the right to vote in the election is given to all the people equally, more or less, because everybody is equally placed, there is no need for any discrimination. By the universal adult suffrage, which is guaranteed in the constitution, that is one man, one vote, one value, everybody at the stroke of the commencement of the constitution was given the right to vote without any discrimination. But however, still the right to contest election is not equal. That means although everybody or eligible candidate can contest the election, but the people who are from the scheduled caste or scheduled tribe, they are not really having the resources to contest the election and to fight with others, but their representation is also equally important, and for that particular reason the reservation has been allowed for the members of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe in the Lok Sabha as well as the legislative assemblies. Now that principle of reservation now has been extended to the women as well. So can anyone put it in the comment box, which Constitutional Amendment Act has extended the principle of reservation to women in the Lok Sabha elections and in the Legislative Assembly elections, which I already discussed. If you know the answer, you can put it in the comment box. So this is basically the idea of what is called as justice. So justice is about fair treatment, may not be about what is called as equal treatment. The next principle is what is called as liberty, that is liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship. Now when you talk of liberty, so liberty is nothing but a freedom within a legal framework. That means freedom is allowing you to do what you want to do, but freedom without any constraint or freedom without any restraint is dangerous. Now when you talk of freedom without any constraint or restraint, that in the name of freedom we may engage in something that can cause harm to others. So for example, just because we have the freedom, we cannot harm or we cannot physically harm others, or someone who is powerful cannot physically harm the weak person. So in the name of freedom, we cannot take away the rights of others. So hence, what is guaranteed under the Constitution is basically what is called as liberty. Liberty of your thought, the way you can think. Liberty of thought, the way your liberty to express the things. Liberty of thought, expression, your liberty to believe in certain things, you have faith in certain religion and probably worship certain God. So these are all the liberty that is guaranteed. But the word liberty has to be closely observed. What is this liberty means? Liberty means freedom within a particular legal framework. That means liberty means which will allow you to do whatever things that you want to do so that you can realize your potential, help you grow. So to that extent, certain element of freedom is given to you. But it also comes with certain reasonable restrictions or reasonable constraints. So if you have to differentiate between what is freedom and liberty, so freedom is something which is unrestrained or has no constraints. But in a civilized society, there is no place for freedom. What we actually exercise in a civilized society is what is called as liberty. That means it is also similar to that of the concept freedom, but it is not absolute. It comes with certain reasonable restrictions. It comes with certain constraints. Say for example, if you talk of liberty, a number of articles in the Constitution does give us some liberty. Say for example, there is freedom of speech and expression, there is freedom of movement, there is freedom of residence, there is freedom of occupation, trade and business. So you may ask that the word freedom is used, but you will also understand that all these freedom that is mentioned in Article 19 of the Constitution, and if you completely read Article 19 of the Constitution, for every right that is given in Article 19, there is also corresponding restriction. That means to what extent these rights may be restricted by the state. So actually what is given under the Constitution, although the word freedom has been used, what actually we exercise is what is called as liberty. And because all these things comes with a set of reasonable restrictions. Say for example, we have the right to freedom of speech and expression, but that right to freedom of speech and expression is subject to restrictions on the grounds of what is called as contempt of the court. In the name of freedom of speech and expression, we cannot criticize the judges, we cannot criticize the institution of judiciary, because that is not something which is guaranteed under the right to freedom of speech and expression. So on the one hand, there is right to freedom of speech and expression, but it does have certain restrictions as well. So that is basically what is the idea of liberty. So not only this particular right, a number of liberty is guaranteed under the Constitution, including our right to religious rights. And that also comes with certain reasonable restrictions. That's basically what is called as a liberty. Now, why liberty is very important? Liberty is important because without liberty, we will not be able to realize our potential. And many of our ideas might be constrained if you are not having the liberty to do what we wanted to do. But of course, that it should allow others also to do what they want to do in an equal manner. So that's what is called as liberty. That means a platform is provided for everybody to grow in a society without compromising or with a minimal compromise on certain things. That's basically what is called as liberty. Now come to the next concept, what is called as equality. So equality means basically that the state shall not discriminate the people based on their background, based on their caste, based on their religion. That's basically what is called as equality. So this is again an important principle that is there in the constitution. So this principle of equality is very much embedded in number of provisions in the constitution. Say for example, article 14 talks about equality before law. Article 15 talks about that no discrimination shall be done by the state on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex or place of birth. So these are all based on the principle of what is called as equality. So no discrimination either based on their status, and whatever may be the status or whatever may be their background, everybody shall be treated equally by the state. Everybody shall be given equal opportunity by the state. That's basically what is this particular principle of equality. And the next important objectives in the constitution is basically what is called as fraternity. That the state shall promote a feeling of fraternity among the people. That means the state shall promote what is called as a feeling of brotherhood among all the citizens. In fact, there are a lot of provisions in the constitution that promotes the feeling of brotherhood among the citizens. But one important example if you have to take is the concept of single citizenship. In fact, do you know that why the members of the Constituent Assembly has provided in favor of what is called a single citizenship rather than going for say dual citizenship, one citizenship for the entire country and probably one citizenship for every state. Some countries do have that. Say for example, United States of America, one citizenship for the entire country and one citizenship for their respective states, which is also a federal country. But in India, the Constituent Assembly did not adopt for it because they thought that if you are giving a citizenship for a state, then the regional identity would prevail over the national identity. The regional identity would become so predominant that people might have some differences in terms of their identity. So there should be only one identity for the people, that is being the citizen of India. So thereby they can promote the feeling of what is called as fraternity. So these are all some examples of the provisions in the constitution which does reflect the objectives, and those things are summarized in the preamble to the Constitution of India. So we try to understand the nature of the state. We have tried to understand some of the objectives also. And before we complete, we shall also understand what is called as the dignity of an individual. Now, if you look into the objectives, it also talks about justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, and thereby ensuring the dignity of an individual. So, what do you understand by dignity of an individual? So, ensuring the dignity of an individual means that it is the vision of the founding fathers of our constitution or the members of the Constituent Assembly that every individual in India or every citizen of India is treated with respect and treated with what is called as honor, and they shall have a feeling of what is called as being worthy. And that's when they will also feel that they have a dignified life. So that means everybody should have a feeling of being respected, a feeling of being worthy, and everybody is treated with what is called as honor. And this can happen only when there is equality. This can happen only when there is justice. So this dignity of an individual itself can be preserved only when the state does not discriminate. And that is the reason you will understand that to avoid this particular discrimination, there are a number of provisions again given in the constitution. Say for example, the abolition of untouchability under Article 17. The abolition of or the prohibition of various exploitative practices like child labor or human trafficking, bonded labor, they all has been considered to be violation of the fundamental rights. Why? If these practices continue to exist, then that goes against the very dignity of an individual. And hence, it is also the very objective of the members of the Constituent Assembly that the individual dignity has to be preserved and it has to be protected. All right. And then the other objective is also preserving the unity and integrity of the nation. When you talk of unity, so this unity is defining the fact that despite being a lot of diversity in India, be it cultural diversity, be it religious diversity, or whatever may be the diversity, India still continues to be what is called as a unified nation. So that is what this particular concept of unity is defining. And then the word integrity is more related to what is called as the concept of territorial integrity. That means the objective of the constitution is to preserve the territorial integrity of India. When I say territorial integrity of India, it also deals with that the territorial sovereignty has to be protected. And apart from the territorial sovereignty, anything that would affect the national interest has to be preserved and protected. So all these things has to be taken care as a part of what is called as territorial integrity. Say for example, the constitution has to take care, or the way the objectives in the constitution is that if suppose tomorrow there are secessionist tendencies, certain part of the country wanted to move away from the territory of India, so that is not allowed under the constitution. So thereby ensuring what is called as unity and the territorial integrity of India, and similar provisions are there in the constitution. Say for example, Article 1 itself is talking about what is called as India, that is Bharat, shall be union of states. And this mere expression itself making it very clear that no states in India will have the right to secede from the union, which I will subsequently explain when I take up the union and its territories. But for time being, what is the understanding you should have? For time being, the understanding you should have is that it is also the objective to preserve what is called as the unity and integrity, which is basically that unity is preserved despite diversity in our country, and there is also that the territorial integrity has to be preserved, thereby protecting what is called as the sovereignty in our country. Okay, so these are all the various objectives, and we also seen what is called as the nature of the Indian state. So before I conclude the topic of preamble, there are few more topics that you have to discuss, and one important question that you have to understand is that is the preamble an integral part of the constitution, or in other words, is the preamble is also part of the constitution? And this particular question was to be answered by the courts. So whenever there is any ambiguity with regard to any interpretation of the constitution, we know ultimately it is a Supreme Court who is the final interpreter of the constitution. So this matter was taken up by the Supreme Court, or rather initially 1960 in the Babu Union case, this matter was referred to the Supreme Court by the President of India. There is an article which we will subsequently discuss. If there is any ambiguity with regard to any of the provisions of the constitution, the President may refer those questions to the Supreme Court under Article 143 of the constitution, and then the Supreme Court will give its opinion in this particular regard. So accordingly, in 1960 this matter was referred to the President to ask whether the preamble is an integral part of the constitution. Is the preamble is also included within the Constitution of India? The Supreme Court gave its opinion that the preamble is not an integral part of the constitution. So the preamble is not an integral part of the constitution, but however the preamble may be used to interpret the various provisions of the constitution. The preamble can be used as a key to unravel the minds of the makers of the constitution, but it in itself is not an integral part of the constitution. So this was a view that was given by the Supreme Court, and this matter continued, and again the same issue was raised in front of the Supreme Court in a case which is called as the Keshavananda Bharati case, a very significant case in the history of India. But however, I will discuss more about this case when I take up the fundamental rights. But for time being, you can understand that in the Keshavananda Bharati case, a lot of matter is to be decided by the Supreme Court, but one interesting matter is also whether the preamble is an integral part of the constitution. In fact, this case is so significant that 13 judges of the Supreme Court sat in this particular case, and they declared that the preamble is an integral part of the constitution. So what is the understanding you should have since the Keshavananda Bharati case till this point of time? The view that has been consistently taken by the Supreme Court, including the LIC of India case, that yes, the preamble is an integral part of the constitution. There should be no doubt in this regard. So if a question comes in the examination, is a preamble an integral part of the constitution? Yes, the preamble is an integral part of the constitution. So now the question is, if the preamble is an integral part of the constitution, can the preamble be amended? Because the constitution can be amended by the parliament, and the Supreme Court has said that the preamble is an integral part of the constitution. So if the preamble is an integral part of the constitution, can the preamble be amended? The Supreme Court said in the Keshavananda Bharati case, yes, because the preamble is an integral part of the constitution, the preamble can also be amended. There is no restriction in this particular regard, but the preamble can be amended, no doubt, but the amendment to the preamble, like the other provisions of the constitution, is subject to what is called as a doctrine of basic structure. So what exactly is this doctrine of basic structure? It's a very big topic which I'll subsequently discuss, but for time being understand. This doctrine of basic structure was innovated by the Supreme Court in the Keshavananda Bharati case. The very idea of this doctrine of basic structure is that in the opinion of the Supreme Court, the power of the parliament to amend the constitution is not unlimited, rather it is limited. It is limited to the extent what? It is limited to the extent that it cannot amend the basic features in the constitution. It cannot amend those important features in the constitution which will change the entire philosophy of the constitution, which is so important in the constitution. So this is basically what is called as the doctrine of basic structure. So try to understand. So that means, to the question whether the preamble can be amended, yes, you can amend the preamble, no doubt, but you can amend the preamble without disturbing the basic features in the preamble. So some of the students also have a misunderstanding that the preamble is part of the basic structure. No, the preamble is not part of the basic structure, but the preamble contains certain words which is part of the basic structure. Say for example, in the Supreme Court, in the Keshavananda Bharati case, the Supreme Court said that there are certain words in the preamble. Say for example, the words like democracy, the words like republic, the words like sovereignty, the words like justice, the words like equality, they are all part of the basic structure. And hence, if the preamble is to be amended, you can amend, no problem. But without disturbing these words which is there in the preamble, which is part of the basic structure, you can amend the other things. So two questions you'll have to understand very clearly, 2 points. First, is the preamble an integral part of the constitution? Yes. And therefore, can the preamble be amended? Yes, it can be amended. Can the preamble be amended in total? No. The preamble can be amended, but without disturbing the basic features in the preamble. And is the preamble part of the basic structure? No, the preamble is not part of the basic structure, but some of the key words in the preamble would constitute what is called as a basic structure. Without amending them, the parliament can amend the other provisions in the preamble. And because of this only, the parliament was able to amend the preamble by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, and they inserted 3 important words into the preamble, that is socialist, secular and the word integrity, and once so far the preamble has been amended. So very quickly, if I have to complete this summary of this particular lecture. So we have understood what is a preamble. So preamble is nothing but a preface, introduction, philosophy, key to unravel the minds of the makers of the constitution, whatever be it. But what you will have to understand is that this preamble is talking about the various nature of the Indian state. It also talks about the objective of the constitution, and in that we have understood what is the meaning of the word sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic, and we also understand the meaning of the word justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, dignity of an individual, and also the unity and integrity of the nation. Now one last question before I complete this particular lecture: is the preamble legally enforceable in a court of law? The Supreme Court has clarified in the Keshavananda Bharati case that the preamble, though an integral part of the constitution, it is not enforceable in a court of law. That means, though there are a lot of things that is there in the preamble, that does not give any authority to any of the organs. Because it is mentioned in the preamble, that does not give any power to the legislature, that does not give any power to the executives, that may not give any power to the judiciary also. But however, what is the purpose of this preamble? The purpose of the preamble is that if at all any of the other provisions of the constitution is to be interpreted, and to that extent if there is any ambiguity in the constitution, the preamble can be used by the Supreme Court in interpreting the other provisions of the constitution and thereby giving effect to the other provisions of the constitution. So preamble in itself is not enforceable in a court of law. Preamble in itself does not give any source of power to either legislature or the executive, but definitely it is an integral part of the constitution. And because it is an integral part of the constitution, they can be amended also. But however, without disturbing the basic features in the preamble. But however, the preamble in itself is not part of the basic structure. That means the total preamble is not part of the basic structure. It has certain words which is part of the basic structure. All right. So with that, we are coming to the end of the topic preamble. So please look into this particular question, and I'm quite sure it will be very easy for you to answer this particular question. The preamble in the original constitution was read as A. Sovereign secular republic, sovereign socialist republic, sovereign democratic republic, none of the above. So you can put your right answer in the comment box. So with that, we have come to the end of this particular lecture. So if you have any of your family members and friends who are preparing for any of the competitive examination, you can refer them this particular channel, and it will be immensely beneficial to the candidates who are looking into this particular channel. And if you want to reach out to me for any queries related to the preparation of the examination, you can reach out to me through my Telegram channel or through my Instagram account. All right. Thank you very much. All the very best. Keep watching.